Good morning, everyone. For anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Kate and I am a trauma-informed clinical hypnotherapist, practitioner and domestic abuse coach. And I help women to break free from the overwhelming effects of domestic abuse and narcissistic abuse so they can move on to a happier and brighter future. Now, of course, with that comes an impact on children. Now, I did do a live on Wednesday, I think it was, on the connection with addiction and, you know, children that have been exposed to addiction and children who have been exposed to domestic abuse, etc., etc. Hi, Emma, and how it links to traits associated with ADHD and autism. Now, I got this email in this morning from BrainMD, which is ran by a doctor called Dr. Rahman, and he does brain health practitioner certifications and all sorts. So he specifically obviously specialises in the brain. Now, in this blog post that he sent out, it doesn't specifically say what I was discussing, but it skirts around that subject. So he starts off by saying, so myth one, ADHD is a fad diagnosis. So ADHD is recognised as a medical condition by the American Psychiatric Association, with the diagnostic criteria, which is basically it's in the DSM. And the DSM is the manual that psychologists use, clinical psychologists use to diagnose people. There's nothing very clever in them in the way they diagnose people. They go off a list of characteristics in the DSM and they have to meet 5 of those characteristics in the list. That's how they come up with a diagnosis. So they've given it a group of characteristics a label, and if they're not in that list, then you know you haven't got all five. You can't meet 5 in that list of criterias. Then you don't meet that diagnosis. But I say I'm going to go on. So everybody outgrows behaviour problems, he's saying, is another myth number 2. So it's been assumed that everyone outgrows attention behaviour deficiencies by the age of 12 to 13. However, many people never outgrow it and have symptoms that interfere with their daily lives for decades. Okay, so that is absolutely true. The reason being is because all these traits and the general traits for people who are, when kids are diagnosed with ADHD, or even adults that are diagnosed with it, you know, later on in life, but it's more common in children to be diagnosed. It is a lack of concentration, ongoing behaviour problems, so aggression, fighting, which affects them with them making friends. It causes all sorts of problems for them. And I say that this is where he goes on to, where he says, 33% never finish high school, and that is due to their inability to concentrate. Inability to concentrate can be down to brain fog. Okay, so when we have ongoing trauma, when we've got a trauma overload. Hi, Emma. When we've got an overload of traumatic events that are consuming and taking up all the space in our hippocampus, we can't think clearly. Now, I know I've noticed this with Sophia. There's certain things that she's she was able to do. So, I mean, blending, basic thing of blending means Sophia is massively academically behind, massively. She's way behind the national average. And she just doesn't seem to be making a really quick progress at all. I mean, I don't know how she's going to cope come year two. I don't know, because she still can't read. Blending's still a difficulty for her. But when I say this, she used to be able to blend before some of the major issues that she was exposed to. I mean, bearing in mind she's been exposed to things from birth with her dad, particularly on the addiction side of things. I am waiting to be assessed for ADHD, so is right. Yeah, I mean, honey, I know. I mean, obviously, I know, the issues that you've had. If you want to have a chat, I'm more than happy to have a chat with you, darling. But it's bottom line is it's trauma, and it's these behaviours, these traits, are 100% as a result of the brain wanting to protect you, and your long-term memory is shrunk. So it affects your focus, it affects your memory. There's things that, I mean, it's like Sophia, she used to be able to do that blending. She can't do it anymore. She literally can't do it anymore, but she used to be able to. And our new teachers actually don't believe me. I showed them a video of her doing it more than 12 months ago, and what she was doing there she can't do today. And that is purely and simply down to this shrinkage of capacity in the hippocampus, and it's just caused massive brain fog. So, this is why, it's, Dr. Arman saying 33% never finish high school, and that's because they have, and it's been proven that children who are exposed to domestic abuse or addiction or ongoing trauma from a very young age, they have a lack of interest in learning. They have they're usually academically behind massively because of that. They present with aggression issues. They can have anger outbursts, which obviously I've experienced with Sophia a lot. They will retaliate to their friends. These are all things that they do, and they're all parts to protect themselves. They just want to. It's the brain's way of protecting them. That's it. So one of the other traits is that he says 52% of untreated teens, and when he refers to untreated, obviously commonly you can get medication for ADHD, but this is a trauma problem. This is encoding on the amygdala that needs addressing. That's not something a drug can fix. A drug cannot fix that. A drug can increase serotonin, so it can increase the happy hormones, which is again something that ongoing trauma exposure from a young age, resulting in complex post-traumatic stress disorder, can affect our brain's ability to produce serotonin and dopamine effectively enough, which is another reason why he's saying the 52% untreated teens and adults with these problems usually abuse alcohol or drugs, and that is a means of the brain using those things as a substitute for not being able to produce the serotonin and dopamine effectively enough naturally on its own. So although the alcohol and the drugs don't specifically induce the serotonin, it induces the dopamine hit, and it's the dopamine that is actually addictive to the body. It's addictive to the system, and that's why people become addicted. People keep going to it and being drawn to it. You can be addicted to absolutely anything. You can be addicted to sex. You can be addicted to shopping, you can be addicted to food, sugar, you know, anything at all you can be addicted to. Gambling, anything that gives you that instant high, that dopamine hit is going to like, yeah, okay, I need more of that, I need more of it, give me more. And it will seek out, because it just wants to make you feel better, it just wants to make you feel good. And it'll give you permission to go to the very things that it remembers. Oh, okay, I remember you felt good then. Okay, I'm going to give you permission to do these things, even though I know these things are destructive to your overall health or other people's psychological well-being as well. The brain doesn't think of logic and rationale. Emotion will always override logic. Even though intelligently people know these habits are completely wrong and bad for them and their loved ones around them, they can't stop it. They literally can't stop it, because the encoding, this younger part of themselves, is driving the show, literally driving the show. It's given those permissions long before the active thinking brain's kicked in. And that's why, generally speaking, it's very difficult to talk yourself out of a decision once the brain's already given you permission to do it. And this is why, you know, detox programs are so unsuccessful, because all they're doing is sending them to talking therapies, CBT, AA, you know, which is another form of talking therapy. Or they give them drugs, but it doesn't deal with the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem is the encoding on the brain, and that's what needs to be dealt with. He also goes on to say that 46% of untreated hyperactive boys will be arrested for felony by the age of 16, compared to 11% of controls. 21 to 25% of those incarcerated have been found to have ADHD, according to several studies. 75% have interpersonal problems, so they have problems, you know, in communicating socially with people. 6% have a higher risk of being involved in bicycle collisions, and higher than average percentage of motor accidents, speeding tickets, and that's due to they're always looking for that high. They are risk takers. They become risk takers. Anything that gives them that rush, that energy rush, that dopamine hit. That's why they're attracted to dangerous situations, dangerous activities. Because they need that dopamine hit. You know, I know with my ex, I mean, he would engage in some horrendous things, and I'm thinking, you know, that are really risky. I mean, really, really risky. But he did them because he needed that dopamine hit. So although he is narcissistic, he has narcissistic tendencies, it's still this result of the same thing. Again, he's got addiction problems. It's all as a result of the same thing. This encoding on the brain, this childhood trauma that's been embedded on the brain, and those protector parts are there to self-soothe in the moment. They're always there to self-soothe. The only difference is between a narcissist and somebody who's codependent, is that one needs to prove to themselves that they're good enough, and the other one needs to get that validation from everybody else. I need to prove to everybody else I'm good enough. And that's why a narcissist and a codependent are literally like magnets to each other. They serve a purpose to each other. But, you know, addiction, you know, an addiction counsellor will tell you that addiction can be genetic, and it can be as a result of childhood trauma. You know, I've done an introductory counselling diploma in substance abuse, and that's something that they covered. but there is no addiction, addiction gene. There's no alcoholic gene or drug addict gene. It doesn't exist. There's no specific gene. So again, it goes back to the same thing. So where it can be genetic, it's been clinically proven that from the womb, that can affect the size of the amygdala from the time that the brain's developing, from 15 weeks. So children who have maybe got a mother who's had addiction problems, they will automatically have a dysregulated nervous system. So that means even if they're not aware, if they're not aware of it, their body and their system is in fight or flight. So that means their cortisol levels are on a high. They're flowing significantly through the body, which is being passed on to the baby. And the baby in the womb, the system's been conditioned to be on high alert, and the amygdala is growing in size to accommodate that need for hypervigilance. So a baby that is born with an enlarged amygdala will, they may be a very cry baby. Maybe you literally can't put them down. It may not even be the mother that's had the problem. Maybe it could be the father that's the addict, and their behaviours has caused disease with the mother while the mother's carrying the baby. That will have a knock-on effect. It could be where they say, it's Mr. Generation. So so I know with my ex, I think his granddad was an alcoholic, I think, and so but obviously his mum wasn't. But his mum certainly will have had, because she was in an abusive relationship with his dad, and all that would have had an impact on her, which resulted in the way she would have behaved with him, and it all ties in together. So you've got to look generationally as well as to what were the psychological conditions generationally, because that will have passed on unless that trauma encoding has been healed at some point to break that chain. It will keep moving on generationally. Because when I look back at my mum and dad, I can see it in them. I look back at their parents, I can see it in them. So I can see where it's passed on generationally, and I've passed this on to Sophia. Now I have a chance now to repair that with Sophia because she's young enough. And obviously I can obviously, reparent myself and, change that encoding myself, but that takes time because it's, there's a lot of years of encoding there. But it is life-changing when you do it. It's, even after a few sessions with people that I do with people, they can see a difference, they can feel a difference. And you make a way that you can disassociate from certain events as well. So there is definitely a connection there between ADHD and trauma, 100%. I believe it's just a label. And these traits are parts that the brain is using to protect itself from feeling something else. That's it. It's protecting it from feeling something else that was too painful to ever bear again. So, it's, yeah, and that is essentially what, and there is no, I thought Sophia was down on child trauma therapy list, and apparently they don't offer it to children until after the age of 12. Well, when they've got it available, what sort of process they use, I couldn't tell you. How effective it is, again, I couldn't tell you. But how effective or not it is, they don't offer it. And play therapy is great. Play therapy is a great way of them getting them to communicate through play and through drawing and things like that. So expressing what's actually on their mind and their worries and things like that. So I know a tool that they use a lot is getting them to draw a picture of what's inside their house of worries and what's inside their house of dreams and what's inside their house, their happy house. I don't know who's on, by the way, Facebook isn't showing me. So, you know, and, you know, they will draw. That's a way of getting them to open up, because they'll just draw a picture of what's inside these houses. So from that perspective, it is very, very useful. I use another tool with, I've actually done my own actually, which is a bit more clearer for children, but this is something I use a lot, and I'm actually going to be using this and explaining how to use it properly in a workshop I'm going to be doing on the 12th. So, and this applies to adults and children. So this is called the polyvagal theory, and it's the emotional regulatory ladder. Okay, so when we are, so it's a good way of understanding where your children are on their emotional regulatory system. So it's good to sit down and talk to them about it when they are calm and stable. I just ask them, you know, where, you know, what do they feel when they're, what do they feel when they're here? And I mean, Sophia knew straight away when I didn't explain it to her at all. Again, what do they feel when they're here? What sort of events happen? What sort of things happen that makes you feel like that? And what makes you feel, what do you feel here? And give me an example of an event that's happened that made you feel like this. I mean, I know Sophia will say, you know, when people say things to hurt her feelings, or, you know, if, you know, somebody's made her angry, it's usually associated with a daddy, actually, that one. And here, this one, you know, is where she's happy, she's in a happier place. And, you know, I'll say, well, what makes you feel happy being with you, mummy? You know, so it's really good. So then when they are in a state of distress, once they have, depending on where they are, how bad they are, and whether you can communicate with them, wait till they calm down and then talk to them about it. Okay, so where were you? Where were you just then? Can you show me where you were on the ladder? And then that will, without them having to explain it, you will then know what sort of emotions they were feeling to present with those behaviours, and you'll understand better as to what they need from you to get them back up here, okay, to safety, because this is where we want them to be. We want to be up here back with safety. But the problem with children is children can't articulate very well what they want, and this is why these sorts of tools are very, very useful in helping you to understand where they are in their system. You know, look, you know, it's great, you can get a diagnosis, but it doesn't take away from the fact of what the root cause of the problem is. The root cause of the problem is what is childhood stuff. That's what it is. It's childhood encoding, and it's the senses around us are picking up on those snapshots that have been taken from childhood, and the thalamus is sending a signal to your amygdala to remind you of certain snapshots that your senses are picking up, and the alarm system will go off if it coincides with one of those snapshots that are taken at the time of an event years ago. You know, so it's an involuntary thing, and there's a process that you need to go through to really pin down where this encoding started. It's not as simple as just saying, oh, this is how I feel. You can do it as to just how you feel if you can't remember, you know, so that we can clear away some of the events to make room for stuff. Because if you imagine it a bit like you know, a bucket, and you've got lots and lots of stones in, and you've got sand in the bottom, and it's crushing down all these long-term events, and you can't. You probably had times where you're like, well, oh, I remember this. you're literally searching your memory banks to think of a past event, and you can't for the life of you remember what it was. And that's because the hippocampus has shrunk. Your capacity, your long-term memory has shrunk. So until we timestamp some of those events, those won't come through. I mean, I've worked with people who we've dealt with some events, and then they're like, oh, I remember this, I remember this, I remember this. And it's not that they forget that they didn't happen, they just weren't at the forefront of their long-term memory bank. And then once we cleared away some of the dead wood, we were able to make space for them things to breathe and move, and they could then remember the more detail from those events, so that they could then deal with processing those events also. So it is a long process, but it is doable, totally doable. So yeah, so I hope you found that useful. But I genuinely do not believe that drugs are the answer for children with ADHD. It is a case of dealing with this encoding. And it's also a case of, because our instabilities and our insecurities can trigger theirs. So it's a case of dealing with our own stuff so that their behaviours aren't triggering us. Because then once we're both triggered, we're both bouncing off each other, we're both like this, okay? And that's just World War One. I mean, it's you know, that's just chaos. You've got, you know, you're in the emotional part of your brain, behaving like childlike. They're in the emotional part of the brain, behaving like the child that they are, and there's no rationale. So you may only just be able to manage their behaviours and control them until they're a bit older. But by dealing with your own stuff means that you're better equipped to deal with them and regulate them quicker. And then once you are able to teach them how to self-soothe and self-regulate, because they see you as calmer, it literally has a knock-on effect to them. So it very much starts with us. A pill's not going to fix this. It's just not. It's a short-term fix. It's a sticky plaster. You want to deal with the long-term problem. So yeah. So I hope you found that useful anyway. And I'm going to sign off now. I do actually have a interview this afternoon with somebody to talk about the book and what have you. So yes, anyway, I shall catch you all again on another live. I have the workshop coming up if you want to join that on the 12th. And yeah, so if you want to join that, just drop a comment and I shall send you the link for you to join the workshop. And I shall catch you all again on another live.